When you first get an open hold flute, it can be a bit of a struggle to get your fingers to cover the keys. So you're normally given a set of 5 of these little plugs, plastic or cork, these ones are cork, to plug into the holes so that you can actually play the flute properly. And I often get asked, when you're getting used to playing without these plugs in, should you take all of the plugs out all at once or one at a time? Teachers have very strong opinions on this, and I'll tell you why and what I think is the best way. My name is Jane Kavanagh. I live in Sydney in Australia, and I took my flute teaching school online because I want to show you how the best way to improve is to really understand what you're doing. Breaking concepts up into tiny little pieces that actually make sense and you know why you're doing it is the best way to accelerate your flute playing. It's because this understanding builds up little by little by little and makes playing so much easier. Not to mention sounds so much better too. Okay, should you pull all of your plugs out all at once or one at a time? Bit of background first. You probably already know, if you have an open hold flute, that you need to cover these exactly. If even just one of these holes is cracked a tiny bit, the whole flute won't work. So here's an example of the holes covered. The flute will work. Now if I move my hands so that the holes are not covered, this is what the same scale sounds like. So obviously not very good. Not much like a flute either. There are 2 commonly taught approaches to taking the plugs out. One is to take them all out at once, and the other one is you take them out one at a time. Taking one plug out at a time is fine if you have good hand position. So if you already have a good hand position and you take plugs out one at a time and you just have to very, very slightly adjust your finger to cover the hole, that's fine. That's great. But if you don't have such a great hand position, it can actually make it worse. So if let's say your hand position is not so good. I'm going to twist this hand. I'm going to flatten my fingers here. And what else can I do? I can chuck my thumb forward a little bit here, or a lot. So I'm missing the holes. If you have a hand position that's not quite right, and probably not this bad either, and you try and take one plug out at a time, let's say you take this plug out, you're going to move that finger back. And let's say that you might get used to that, it's not going to be very comfortable, but then let's say you take this plug out and you move that finger back. Then let's say you move that finger out and you move that one back. I have a worse hand position now because I've moved my fingers, but I haven't actually fixed my hand position. So taking one out at a time is good if you've already got good hand position, and it's not so good if you have it's bad if you have not so good a hand position. All right, the other option is the cold turkey, taking all 5 plugs out at once. If you have a good hand position where your hands are slightly curved, your fingers are on top of the keys as opposed to like this, your thumb here is not too far forward and it's not too far back, and your right hand is not too twisted this way, you're going to be fine doing cold turkey, taking all the plugs out at once. Your fingers might need to adjust a little bit and you'll be okay. But if you don't have a great hand position and you take all the plugs out at once, it's going to be a frustrating mess. It's going to be a catastrophe because you won't be able to cover any of the holes, and you'll just be so frustrated because you can't get through even a line of music without it sounding like this. That's what happens. And it's so, I know, I have had students that have tried this by themselves, taken all the plugs out. A frustrating mess is what I call it. So you might be thinking now, okay, that's great, Jane, but if I don't have great hand position, what am I supposed to do? Because one plug out at a time is not going to work for me. Cold turkey is not going to work for me. So yes, I do have a solution. It's a bit of a hybrid solution. You probably guessed, we really need to get your hand position right for you to play an open hold flute without the plugs. So the way I do this with students is I do one hand at a time. And the reason for this is because you can address your whole hand and you only have to deal with, say, 2 holes in this hand. And if it's this hand, you only have to deal with 3 at a time. We can get your hand position right and get you covering the holes. So that is my advice. Do 1 hand at a time so that you can address your hand position and make sure that your fingers are curved but not too curved, curved and not flat, that your thumb is in the right position, your hands are not twisted, and you'll be able to cover all the holes easily with a little bit of practice. You might be thinking at this stage, why on earth would I want an open-holed flute if it seems so complex a task to get used to it? Well, open-holed flutes, they encourage good hand position, as you know from what I just talked about. Open-holed flutes also have a slightly nicer tone to them. It's more important to have a good embouchure and a good way of blowing for your tone. But open-holed flutes do make your flute sound a little bit nicer. The reason I like playing it on open-holed flute, I like the feel. What's the word? It's very tactile. It feels nice on my fingers, and I also have greater control when I'm playing flute. If you sort of need an emergency pitch change to fit in with an instrument or a chord that you didn't expect to have to play either particularly sharper or flatter, and you can do it on the spot. You can change your pitch on the spot like this. Watch this finger. This is not the normal way of playing a flute in tune, but it's a good sort of spontaneous emergency ability to adjust your tuning. That's why I like it. There are professional players that play closed-hole flutes. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. It's just a preference. Okay, and one more little tip to help you get used to playing an open-holed flute. If you put your plugs in, all of them in, but you push them down quite far so that you can really feel that there's a hole there but the plug's still in, if you do that with all 5, it will feel like you're playing an open-holed flute, and you can get used to that tactile feeling I was saying about where the holes are. So that's a good way to actually get used to playing an open-holed flute, but without the risk of not covering the holes. Now, I mentioned about getting a better sound. You don't do that by going and buying an open-holed flute to get a better sound. You do that by adjusting and working out the best way to play using a good embouchure. So if you want to come and join me for a free 3-day mini course on instantly improving your tone, it's all about embouchure. Come to www.flute.school/free. Join me there for 3 days of lessons to instantly fix your embouchure and get you an instantly better sound on the flute. I'll see you there.